Everyone join me at the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, first thing, actually the second thing is to approve the regular agenda. Does anyone have any questions, any modifications to the existing agenda?
So moved.
Okay, I got a motion by Rick, seconded by Bruce to approve the agenda as presented. If there's no other questions, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay, passes 5-0. Next on the agenda is the consent agenda. Does anyone have any questions or any items that you'd like to pull out of the consent agenda and do?
Please.
Okay,
I'm looking at the park board, I'm sorry, the golf board, and it's fleet rental for $3,500. And I thought last year we bought enough golf carts that we weren't gonna have to rent additional ones. So I don't know if anyone is able to speak to that or not.
I can speak to that. Actually, we've had some tournaments that are probably the biggest we've ever had.
Oh, that's good news?
Yes, so we were required to get additional carts to handle the larger tournaments.
Okay, thank
So
you.
they moved them up. Usually it was about 144 people, but now we've gotten tournaments that 160 people and even, I think we had one tournament, we had 197 people play. So it was just a function of the tournaments now are getting larger.
Okay,
Okay?
all right, no complaints here.
Okay. Any other questions, items in the consent agenda?
One other one is the animal control contract. Article 15, I think the dates are out of date. I think they represent 2022 instead of 2025 or 2026.
You said, yes, you are correct. So we can make that change if
Thank
the
you.
contract's approved.
Okay. That's what I always liked about Maggie.
I love contracts.
She loves contracts. I like numbers.
Move to approve the
We
consent agenda.
balance each other out.
Yeah, any other? Anything else? Okay, then I guess I'll look for a motion to approve the consent agenda,
So moved.
and I will second that. So I got a motion by Rick Seiler, seconded by Chuck Nicolai. Any other questions or comments on the consent agenda? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition? Okay. Passes 5-0. Next on the agenda is where we allow the public to be heard on matters not on the agenda. Again, this is just to make sure everyone understands the council is not going to interact with your comments. If anything needs to be put down and handled outside the meeting, they'll be handled that way. And please limit yourself to 5 minutes. And again, state your name and your address. And right now, so far, I have 2 people, Gary Whitus.
Good evening.
Good evening.
First of all, I just want to, again, offer my support on the new police station. It's nice to see the progress is continuing, and I hope that continues. What I would like to do is mention is the fact that I really think you need to pursue this ADA option so we can move this thing quickly forward and put all the bad feelings behind us, and let's get this thing rolling. So thank you for all you do. I think it's probably been a pretty hectic month for everyone sitting up there. And I'm sure it hasn't been easy, but please continue this and let's get it over with and move this thing forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Brian Paulson.
Hi, my name is Brian Paulson, 206 4th Street Southwest. First, I'd like to talk about the police station as well, specifically the contract. So the city signed a contract before securing financing. Unlike the fire station and standard practice of other cities who sign a contract after securing financing. This contract included an exit clause and a pause clause, options the city knew about, yet despite major public opposition evident in my petition and community feedback, you refused to use them. You were told exiting could lead to a lawsuit for full contract price, but I believe that is misleading. It's only for work performed, not the entire amount. The same logic applies to a $1 billion suit. You can be sued for literally anything, but it's legal standing, not fear tactics. Why sign a contract with with no exit plan before funding if you claim it's unbreakable? Tonight, you just approved $1.5 million, bringing the total spent to, without securing funding, to well over $2 million now. Next, the population memo. The data shows the population decline later in the agenda. In 2023 and again in 2024, we were losing residents. Going back to 2019, we had more people in 2019 than we do in those numbers. It's not growing that you claim to support building this police station, especially the one with this scope. Where is the evidence for this narrative? Because the census certainly doesn't support it. Maybe ask yourself, why are people leaving? It's not the new aquatic center, the nice golf course, nice fire station, beautiful Main Street. Maybe it's they can't afford the taxes. This leads to broader issue. Government rarely looks in the mirror when problems arise. When issues happen, the city seems to blame others and conclude that it hasn't done enough. Instead of pausing to reflect, you double down, as governments often do. Now, the EDA is looking to expanding into housing, high-density units, tax abatements, subsidized lots, tearing down old homes to make vacant lots. This is a power grab, I believe, tied to the new economic development district, raises questions about priorities with the shrinking population. Maybe the reason people are leaving New Prague are because of the actions of the city. Finally, the city has been violating the 1979 Minnesota Data Practices Act, although I'm not sure for how long. They're attempting to fix this mistake too tonight on the agenda. The resolution aims to comply, but if you read the League of Minnesota Cities or the statute, and this is from the League of Minnesota Cities, quote, a responsible authority is appointed by resolution, which must include the name of the specific individual who is appointed. It is inadequate to simply have a resolution that designates a job title, such as city clerk or administrator, as a responsible authority. So it explicitly requires naming responsible authority by name, not title or position. Maybe while we're doing this stuff and it's later in the agenda, the attorney can have a look again before passing this resolution, or if you think you understand it, you can just make the change yourself for tonight. And the last thing is it'd be nice, like if my petition last meeting, there was a memo and it wasn't included in the packet on the agenda and it wasn't up front. So I would appreciate it if those items, if they are going to be brought to the council. It happened again when the tax abatement in last fall, where there was a resolution that was brought to the council without public being able to see it. I believe that's a violation of the open meeting law, so all I ask is that at the bare minimum, it is on the table up front. I would like it if it was posted with the agenda packet on the website. Thank you.
Thank you. There's no one else on the list right now. Would anyone else like to address the council for any items not on the agenda? Anyone else like to speak on behalf? Okay, doesn't look like there's anyone else. So we'll go to the next item, item 5. Nisen's Corner Bar, the liquor license.
Yeah, just a real brief introduction. This will be a public hearing that the city council is holding for Nisen's Corner Bar, number 2 Incorporated, doing business as Nisen's Corner Bar down here at the old Corner Bar location. And then I know Chief Applin and his department did some background checks, and they did not see anything that would necessarily rule out granting a liquor license to Nissen. So I guess that's the information I have, and if you guys have any further questions, we can certainly try and answer them for you.
Guys, anyone have any questions regarding this liquor license? If not, I guess I'll open the public hearing. If anyone would like to speak on this item, right now there is nothing on the list. Anyone want to speak on this regarding Nisen's liquor license? I'll try to say the name right. He's not from here. Anyone want to speak on this? Okay, if not, I guess I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
I got a second by Bruce. If there's no other comments, we'll close the public hearing. Say aye. Aye. Any opposition? Okay. So now we have to act on that. Does anyone have any questions for city administrator, or since we have our attorney here, or anything? If not, I guess I'll look for a motion to approve the liquor license.
So moved.
Okay.
I'll second.
Got a motion by Sean Ryan, seconded by Maggie Bass. If there's any other questions or comments, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, any opposition? Okay, passes 5-0. Good luck.
Thank you. Happy to be in New Prague.
Yes, we're happy to have you.
Back in New Prague.
When's the opening?
Hopefully the beginning of, right at the beginning of August is the goal. So we've been telling everybody August 1st, so
Okay,
fingers crossed.
all right.
Back from the state and we'll see how it goes.
All right. Okay, looking forward to it.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda, city engineer projects update. Do you have anything there, Matt?
Yeah, just a few items.
Yep.
Nothing to update on the 2024 project, but the 2025 project, I do want to point out, this year we've had almost just as much rainfall as we had last year, and I think anyone that saw the progress that was happening last year was very difficult and very frustrating, especially on my end and my staff's end, but you would never be able to tell this year's contractor has been amazing to work with. We're projected to finish 8 weeks ahead of their contract date that they have to be completed by. So we're looking at end of August being completed. So just a special shout out to Holtmeyer Construction. They've been amazing to work with. Their whole staff has, their whole crew has. So we should be paving next week. The final 3/4 of the project has already been paved. We're looking at finishing off the pavement next week most likely, and then we'll have some dirt and seed work to do after that. So it's been a really good year, and it makes life much easier on all of us, residents and everybody. I've received a lot of compliments from residents, which honestly, we don't normally get that. We usually get negative feedback of what's going wrong on the project. So even telling Holtmeyer last week at a meeting that, hey, we've never get this many thank yous. So not that you guys ever see the crew out, but if you do, please tell them thank you because they're doing a great job.
Okay, good. I'm glad to hear that it's going to be done before Dojinki. Be very,
Knock on wood, it should be, yes.
yes, all right. Oh, now I jinxed it. Is that what you're saying?
You did that, not me.
Yeah, oh, okay.
I got a question
Yep.
for you. City Center Storm Pond, you're talking about,
Yeah, we're in the middle of the design phase, and that's almost actually completed. And that'll be presented to you guys once that is completed. But yeah, it's the pond that we've talked about for the last 20, 25 years. I've said it for years that we have this beautiful main street, but flooding will continue until we have that overflow pond in because the creek cannot keep up to all the water that is being sent to it. So until that pond is installed, we will, you probably have seen over the summer that you have a little bit of flooding over by Strike Force and Joe Shoe Repair, and that will continue until that pond's put in. So that is what that design is, to put that pond in, and some other modifications in the area.
So where is the pond going to be compared to the?
The band shelter, or
Yes.
tops,
Yep.
whatever. More towards the northwest. It's gonna actually be along what we consider 3rd Avenue, the gravel road.
Okay,
It'll be 3/4 of the length of the grass area. It's more of a skinnier pond just to kind of wrap around towards the backside of the pops, just to kind of beautifilize the area a little bit instead of just having this big round pond so it'll look extremely nice when it's all done.
Yeah.
If we end up moving forward with the project.
Dan, if you remember, we received a grant to basically have that designed. And so while we haven't figured out where funding is yet to build the pond, we'll have plans ready to go whenever that happens.
yeah, I know we tried to get grants for that in the past from Scott County, but they kept coming back saying, well, that really wasn't a pond, it was a man-made pond, so it wasn't a natural pond, so.
I was just kind of wondering because the seed, I would have thought maybe they could have saved money putting all that seed in, but they put it in anyways.
So that was the difficult part. We actually just received the grant after the contract was already awarded and the seeding was actually down already. But that still wouldn't have stopped us from seeding it because we exactly don't know where the funds are coming from to put the pond in. So right now we just are doing the design phase of it. That's not putting a shovel in the ground. So ideally, I could tell you, yes, the pond's going to be dug next year and we shouldn't have put the seed down, but it also could be 5 more years until the pond's done. So
Well, the residents over there are pretty happy with you though, because the dust has been so low this year.
good.
Okay. Any other questions or comments for Matt? All right, next on the agenda is a police station update. Josh, I assume you're going to take this?
Yeah, I will actually, pass this off to John McNamara from Wold.
Oh, okay. Welcome, John.
Talk this first change order that was out there.
Yeah. Mayor and council, it's good to be here tonight. I know that city administrator has given you an update as to some of the contaminants that were discovered on the site during the initial part of the excavation work. And so what we're here tonight is just to kind of clean that up. The work has been completed, and we just need to get it into a formal change order for the contractors so that they can add that to their contract. The first one was when they opened up the metal storage building. They discovered some buried concrete vault in there that had some contaminants in it, some oil and some petroleum and stuff like that that needed to get pumped out prior to them demolishing that building itself. And so that was $5,029 for that. For the actual contaminated soils on the west side of the site, there was a small contained area there. I think we removed roughly about 490 tons of contaminated soil, hauled off site. The nice thing that we were able to discover that it wasn't extraordinarily contaminated, so we didn't have to truck it, or the contractor didn't have to truck it very far. So the price is reflective of that, of the $46,335.27 for that removal. And so because we had to remove that, we had to add some stuff back in up to where the footing bearing was in there. So the next item on there for $6,186.98 was to add some rock to bring that up to what we needed for the footings. And you can see that all the footings have been installed around the building, and they're kind of wrapping things up on the site. And then the last thing on the list is just the removal of that concrete tank that was below that metal storage building for the $1,208.78. So that kind of cleans up the site. So as you can see, like I said, they are progressing with the rest of the footing and foundation work, and are starting to set up for the structural frame for the building. And so tonight, we're looking for council formal action to approve change order 1 in the amount of $58,760.03. And once that is approved by the council, we will send that off to the contractor for signatures. So if there are any questions from the council, I'd be happy to answer them.
How did we miss that? Didn't we do soil borings and all
We
kinds?
did, yeah. I can't remember how many we did out there, but the soil borings didn't find this stuff, and it didn't get discovered, and the contractor started digging out there.
Go ahead.
My question isn't so much to you, I just, rhetorical maybe, but when we purchased the property in 1989, I'm wondering why we didn't know it then, that this was, the whole parcel was purchased for an industrial park, and we actually had city council and everyone walk the property and things, and so I'm not sure, it's kind of odd. I don't know, Matt, if you know the history of that, what that was used for, but obviously there's petroleum in it.
Mm-hmm.
And it must have been predating the pollution control recording requirements. It wasn't on file, probably.
Yeah, there's lots of speculation on what it could be, but you're correct, there isn't any open spills or anything like that.
I've had occasion to have to remove a couple, and there's a lot of old ones that are not of any record, so that doesn't surprise me as much. But the fact that we've owned it since 1989, I guess I'm grateful that we're doing it. It should have been done a long time ago. But.
Yes, and I guess if it had still been in the industrial park, we would have had to incur these costs to sell the lot eventually down the road if we were going to sell it.
I believe you wouldn't be able to sell it without taking care of it.
Right, that's what I mean. So these costs, even though it's related to the police station, it's something I think the city would have been required to do, even if we would have just sold that lot to someone else, not even city related. So
Was this considered a brownfield?
I wouldn't.
Did it rise to that level?
Not that I'm aware of. Somebody else would probably have to weigh in on that. It wasn't a significant amount of contaminated soil. It was fairly contained in one small area.
Okay, because I think the state has super funds to help with the brownfield, so I was just wondering if we could explore that, if it was warranted.
I would have to defer to somebody else to see if that's a high enough quantity to be able to put in a claim for that. I don't think so, but I'm not an expert with that.
I think it would be worth pursuing in the event that we can recoup some of the costs.
Yeah, we can look into that, Maggie.
Thank you.
Okay.
Is Wold overseeing the whole construction process?
The contractor's job superintendent is overseeing the construction process. We're on site with the contractor, inspecting the work and making sure that it's installed per the drawings and specifications.
Oh, okay, so somebody is checking to
Yep.
make sure that the way it was bid out is
Yep.
the way it was, that it's actually, the subs are actually
Yeah,
doing. And-
that is correct.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions for John? Okay, if not, I guess I'll make a motion to approve the, whatever,
Change order number 1.
change order number 1.
I'll second.
Second by Maggie Bass. Any other questions, comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition?
Aye.
Okay, passes 4-1. Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Josh, are you gonna take,
Yes,
B.
Mr. Mayor, I will take the next part. So as we kind of discussed at the last meeting, and council gave directive of staff to start exploring kind of 2 primary options for how to fund the police station. Kind of working both with the city attorney's office as well as Rebecca from Ellers. I kind of put together the memo that was included in your packet, laying out some of the various advantages and disadvantages of each form. So I'll go through that real quick here, since nobody probably wants to hear me read 4 pages worth of memo. So real quick, looking at the 2, we'll call them a CIP bond or an EDA bond. The CIP bond would have a lower rate of the 2. Of note, if we'd been able to sell the CIP bond here lately, the estimate as of July 14th would have been a rate about 4.614%, which is a little higher than what we had back in May, but it is currently sitting about 50 basis points or about 0.5% lower than the EDA bond right now. And it's possible, knowing how markets fluctuate, that that's even changed now. But so an EDA bond do generally have a little bit higher rate than a CIP bond. Right now, with those 2 current rates, the average estimated annual payment for an EDA bond would be about $30,000 a year higher, which to the home valued at about $375,000 is about $3 per year higher, or about 30 cents per month higher for an EDA over a CIP. Of note, the CIP does require voter approval, which is why to follow that particular path at this point, due to a petition being submitted, we would need to take that to special election on the 4th.
4th of what month?
4th of November.
Thank you.
The EDA bond would not require that. It also does not require a public hearing, though procedurally we would need to do a public hearing, because procedurally we would need to update our EDA enabling resolution at the city council level, and the EDA would need to finish establishing its economic development district on their level. So there are 2 public hearings, but they're not directly related to the police station. They're more procedurally for the EDA. The funding in terms of funding availability, CIP bond, you're not looking at funds until at very end of the year at the very earliest. For an EDA bond, we could see them as soon as beginning of October. Really, that's just from not having to wait for the November elections. And finally, one other note that Ellers did share with us is they've kind of worked with us on being able to invest some of our bond proceeds in low-risk CDs and the whatnot in the short term until they're needed, to help kind of recoup some of those earnings. And just based off of the time that we would be holding those, investment earnings for the EDA bond would be about 2.5 times more, or about $112,000 is the current estimate on the EDA bond versus $45,000 investment earnings on the CIP bond. So a few things to consider as we dive into this instead of just numbers. Talking to Scott County, they kind of gave us 2 deadlines for a referendum question. The first would be we'd have to name an absentee location by the beginning of next week. And we would have to then inform the county by August 12th that we're holding a special election. Of note, if we do decide to designate an absentee location and then decide to go the EDA route and not submit, we would still then need to staff that absentee location because it has been noticed as such. So that way any voters in New Prague could vote at that location. If we don't have any elections or ballot questions though, we don't need to necessarily name an absentee location, which is why we haven't talked about it yet at this point. In terms of cost for an election, we're waiting, and Robin can certainly pitch in if I say something wrong, but we're kind of wading into an unknown territory a little bit with this, as it would be an off-year election. So according to the county, we are basically in charge of it from beginning to end. In a normal election year, the county does all the administration and helps out the cities and does a lot of the background work, and we would be in charge of all of that. So I know I've kind of mentioned offhand that maybe $10,000. I would guess it may be at least even double that at this point, knowing that we would do everything from having to order ballots, advertise in newspapers, have the electronics on the election equipment set up, hiring staffing for those 45 days prior, that sort of thing. Also being an off year, training from the county is limited at best. Normally they hold trainings and support throughout the year. Since we're in an off year, it would really push back on staff. And at this point, in past off years, we'd probably be more okay than this off year. We had 3 staff members who were kind of our primary election judge expertises over the last couple cycles, have all moved on to other positions or retired. And so I think there would certainly be a larger burden on the 1 or 2 staff members who have some experience trying to train up everybody on their own without that additional help. I know Councilman Ryan asked about kind of partnering with the school district, and I think we certainly could partner with them if they were open to it in certain ways. But talking to the county, the city does kind of supersede the county, I guess, on the election or the school district on the election hierarchy. And so we would certainly need to host an absentee location here and vote for the 45 days prior, which is kind of where the big expenses would come. And then the school district could decide to either have their absentee there or have them here as well. But there's a potential that we would have to necessarily take on costs that the school district wouldn't have either. So kind of the big election things, it would certainly not be a normal election year for our staff. One of the other things certainly to consider is the uncertainty at the federal level. With the flurry of activity, we've kind of seen bond markets go all over the place a little bit. And I know speaking with our financial consultants there at Ellers, they've even said it's very difficult to predict where bonds may or may not be in 6 months. 2 or 3 months for an EDA bond, you have slight more certainty just with less time, but even that, like, it could go anywhere. So there's certainly an uncertainty at the federal level that just creates an unknown of whether we'll see rise, hold steady, or drops. And then finally, just getting into funds availability and needs. With kind of where we're at now, we wouldn't see funds until October 25 at the earliest if we decided to go the EDA route. And by that point, kind of working with Wold, we've estimated that the project will have cost anywhere from $2.5 to $3 million that we'll be having to kind of carry that cost. And by January 1st, we'd be looking at about $5.2 million. So I guess until that funding is available, the city will be having to look to support that construction elsewhere. When I wrote this memo here last week, our general fund was sitting at a balance of about $3.6 million. And the city is expecting half of its LGA to be paid here at the end of July, which we're thinking will increase that balance to about $4 million. And then we don't really have any large payments until about December. And coming into us, totaling about $2.5 million between property taxes and LGA. And so if the general fund continues to kind of be the primary source for these funds, I would estimate the general fund by itself may be able to support the police station until early October, and at that point, we'd have to start talking if we kind of want to formally look at how we'll continue supporting this until we have funding available. And I think there are certainly options. Probably the best option, if we went that route, would be the sanitary fund, which does have a healthy fund balance of 9.6 million. 9.1 million projected at the end of 25, but we certainly have large projects for maintaining what is a aging facility at this point, and so any sort of draw on that, I would caution that we would want to replace as quickly as possible, just so that we have those funds in place and aren't then having to look at adjusting revenues coming through the sanitary fund. So I guess ultimately all of that to say my recommendation looking at this is, while it certainly is not an ideal situation, I know when the city council set out to do this, they were looking at minimizing the impact on the taxpayer while still being able to complete this project, and that's kind of why we chose the CIP route. I do think that with the potential funding now in a best case scenario being pushed out until the very end of the year, and the fact that the tax impact to the average homeowner, or we'll say a homeowner whose home is about $375, valued at $375, is about $3 a year difference between the two, coupled with the uncertainty around election costs. I guess my recommendation for this would be to kind of proceed kind of the path of looking down the EDA lease revenue option and going that way. So I certainly stand for any questions you have. I know Scott Riggs, our city attorney, is here if you certainly have questions for them. Rebecca Kurtz is here from Ellers. If you've got questions, go that way. But that's kind of where I see things.
I have some questions. So, if I'm looking at page 63 right here, the Ehlers memo, total interest on this GOCIP bonds, 8.297 million. Total interest on the EDA lease revenue bonds, 9.5, so roughly 1.2 million more. And this probably should have been handled if we would have slowed this thing down a little bit, we could have looked at a lot of different options. But if we have that money available in some of our other funds, wouldn't it make sense to pay the interest or not pay the interest and save that money and slowly pay back some of those if we borrow from the wastewater $9 million fund and fund the police station ourselves?
I mean, I think that's certainly an option we could look into. We would want to, we certainly went pretty more high level, I guess, on the needs of the wastewater plant, but borrowing from other funds isn't necessarily unheard of. But at the same time, as I said, we want to make sure we don't put an undue cost on those other funds that would then require them to have to raise rates to offset putting out other loans, if that makes sense.
No, but those are the options that would have been nice that we should have been exploring all the way along this. I didn't even know that was an option until this started, but that's just one of the ideas. I mean, I don't know what the timetable is for the wastewater and what they actually need that's coming up due, but perhaps that could eliminate, well, first of all, the interest rate that we'd be paying, that the taxpayers are going to be paying, and instead of this 14 to 16% roughly increase that could be coming to the city's portion of the levy, perhaps if we could spread that 14 to 16% out a lot farther, because that doesn't include the compensation study. I'm sure wages aren't going down. It doesn't include insurance. I'm sure insurance isn't probably going to go down. So there's going to be a lot of other things that are going to be added to that city budget over and above this police station.
So yeah, I would say of note, I would highly recommend, even if we borrowed from another city fund, to borrow with interest and figure out what we'd want that interest rate set as, only because there is an opportunity cost for every dollar we borrow from, say, the sanitary fund. The sanitary fund is unable to invest that themselves, and so they then lose out on that interest income themselves by borrowing back to the city. So without really breaking down exactly how much we should set that interest rate at, it would probably be closer than we would imagine at what we would want to borrow from ourselves at.
I don't know why we'd pay interest to one of our other funds, but.
Well, because
Because they're not able to reinvest.
No, it's.
They're making money on that money
But I
right now.
was, I know they are, but I'm just saying, it's money that's available that we could possibly use without doing it this way. And then just another point, you know, even if the election, even if we, for some reason, we couldn't partner with the school district who looks like they're gonna have a levy vote themselves, the 1.3 difference, if I'm reading this right, we should let the GO bonds play out, whether it passes or it doesn't.
At a cost of how much?
Well, the cost of the election, which they were putting at
Which
10
is about
or
$10,000 or
$20,000.
$20,000.
But the
Well,
difference
plus
in
the
interest is,
income.
but the difference is in this interest is 1.2 million between the EDA bonds and the CIP bonds. So the 10,000 or 20,000, if we can save 1.2 million, perhaps, that would be the way to go. These are, and the point that I'm really trying to make is, because I don't have the votes here anyways, and I know what you're gonna do. But the fact of the matter is that these are all funding options that we should have been exploring. We know we didn't do it right. We didn't take, I don't believe personally, we didn't take enough, public input.
Sean, that was a clerical error. If we
I
had
don't
held the
care what it
public
is.
hearing, things would have been in a different state. And unfortunately, it was a clerical error.
Okay.
And so we start from square one. And should we, you know, I mean, it's all hindsight. And the thing is that we were doing the right thing from the very beginning. And if we had held the public hearing, chances are we would not be in this state. And so you're kind of taking advantage of a mistake that we made. And it's unfortunate.
I'm not taking a mistake, making a bigger mistake, or trying to use that mistake against anybody here on the council. What I'm saying is, I don't like how, again, and I'm just reiterating the fact that you've already heard, and again, I don't have the votes anyway, so it doesn't matter, but when that timeline, basically, when it went from Mayor Jurek listing that we're exploring the possibility of putting a new police station, and then the next month, the timeline came out, we never missed that timeline. We never slowed it down. I asked repeatedly to tap the brakes a little bit. Let's look at this, and now we see some of this stuff coming ahead. And we just got another $60,000 tab for contaminated soil that we didn't know about.
And we've only been working on this since 2022.
It was part of a list. I still don't know why, how did the police station jump to the front of the list?
Because
There's a long
based on,
list of things that we
based on the
needed.
facility study, it had long lived its life.
I don't believe that, so that wasn't the fact. There was a bunch of things on that list, and all of a sudden this popped up. But anyways, we can move on. So I made my statement.
Just a point of detail, it was the number one thing listed on the facility needs study is the number one concern or issue that the
Yes.
study revealed. So just, that's in the study, so that's, and the park building jumped ahead because of the opportunity to buy a building.
Yes.
But that was all part of the process. And there's often criticisms for transparency, but I don't, haven't seen evidence of it since that information is all out there, has been out there for anyone to see, and also the meetings when this was discussed. The preliminary financing, when this was first discussed, and the attorney actually was at the meeting that discussed that this is a decision for the city council, it's not gonna go to referendum, that EDA lease was an option, that this was another option. As far as funding from funds, that was never talked about. I would agree. I wouldn't have supported it then. I wouldn't support it now. That's not a common way to finance a long-term asset for dedicated funds. So that's where that is. But
Okay. Any other comments?
So I think ultimately, what I'm looking for tonight is if the council would like to go the route of the voter referendum, we would need direction tonight. So that way we can make sure we inform the county at the correct times. If not, then we are looking at other funding options, primarily as we've discussed the EDA lease revenue bond. And if that's the option that you'd like to go, we can certainly start working on that as well.
Okay,
Are you gonna need that in an action?
yes.
Yes, yes.
That would be a,
I make a motion to move forward with the EDA leasing option.
Second.
okay. I got a motion by Maggie Bass to go with looking forward to the EDA option, second by Rick Seiler. Any other questions or comments?
I have some comments I'd like to make. Spurred on probably from the last city council meeting, there's questions that I've heard or became aware of or approached to me that, why wasn't I told it would stop the construction? Why didn't organizers sign the petition? Why were people told it would not raise their taxes if they signed the petition? These are questions that are out there, and these are questions I can't answer. The city council was not involved in the petition, organizing or doing it, counseling, educating, nothing at all that. So questions like these or having to do with why or how it was presented is totally outside the realm of the city council and what we did. I'm not aware that we were involved in any way with the petition, and those kind of questions should go to the organizers or whoever had them. As I said before, I respect the petition, I respect the people, and I think it's good that people were engaged and signed the petition. I started at the same point that Josh started in his memo. I believe it was a successful petition. When I think about this, then it's how to interpret that petition. What does it mean? If I go back to March 17th, where we publicized for a gave public notice for a hearing and presented the information, and the financial advisor presented the details of it, and we asked questions, but the council failed to open the public hearing. There were 2 people at that meeting that could have spoke at that. On the second scheduled hearing, 9 people spoke and 4 people were opposed, or 5 people were opposed, 4 for it. About 35 people attended, I think was reported in the paper. The fire department building, there was about 25 people attended, mostly fire department people that was attended. And so when I look at the petition and trying to reconcile what that means, looking at the history of dealing with this for over 2 years, I'm trying to reconcile what some people have quoted major opposition. The details, in my mind, don't support what I've seen in the past few months. Certainly, the petition is valid and successful, but there are certainly questions that Councilmember Ryan brought up last time about what people thought they were signing. And if people were signing it thinking they're going to stop construction, and no matter what happened, as soon as the petition was done, it's going to cost extra money. You can't get out of a contract for free, and if the petition is, by signing the petition, I take it literally that you didn't want the bond funding to occur with that statute, which means you'd be okay if you went a different direction with the funding, because the petition didn't ask whether you wanted the police department building built or not. It didn't ask to stop the building of it. It didn't have anything to do with that. It had to do with the funding and the financing of it. So taking it that way, because like I said, I try to respect and try to understand maybe what was going on there, but my default position was we should have a referendum and give people an opportunity to get a cheaper way of financing it. But having gone through this and thinking through it, if you sign the petition, it seems to me that you would have been okay then. The alternative to that is either stopping it and incurring the costs, if that's what the thought process was, or you're okay with taking a different route, financing it. So in that way, I rise in support of the resolution.
Okay. I guess I would like to comment also that I had citizens come up to me and said that when people came to their door, they were told that this, if you sign this petition, it was to stop the building of the police station. So they were not, even though it said on top of that petition, and as you said, Sean, you didn't even read it, regarding the petition was just for the CIP bonds. So I have, people that have come up to me and asked, were confused. So I agree with what you're saying, Bruce, is that I think the presentation of the petition probably was not handled properly by the group and caused a lot of confusion. And right now, it seems like people are looking at the city council like they don't know what they're doing, but in fact, the city council actually does know what they're doing. And these people who did the petition probably didn't know what they were selling, in my opinion. So, and I agree with the concept that I think we need to go ahead with the funding. We need to get this thing moving and get this building built and move on to other problems the city has.
I think the petition, excuse me, I think the petition gatherers felt that they were, and I hope I'm not misspeaking for them, because I guess I don't know specifically, but my assumption is that they felt that was the only way that they were gonna be able to stop it, is to take the funding out because contracts had been signed. And it goes back to I heard comments, we had groups of 30 residents that helped with the Main Street design and landscaping. And they met for 2 years before that project even started. The community center, again, 30 people, all from the different various parts of the community, had a say in the community center and what the amenities were gonna be and how it was gonna be funded and whatever else. And that was something that never happened in this situation. And I think that's where the desire came from this group of petitioners to, they wanted a say in it and they didn't like the scale of it, or a lot of them weren't even against a new police station per se. I think they were against the scale and the cost of it. So, yeah,
then
but I
again-
agree, there was a lot of miscommunication. I think there was a lot of people.
But I think, when we did the waste treatment plant, there wasn't a committee. When we did the fire station, there wasn't a committee. A lot of the input was from the fire department itself, so.
And the Main Street project was a MnDOT and city project together, so we had MnDOT representation as well.
So. Okay, any other comments? I have a motion on the floor. Okay, if there's no other comments, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposition?
Aye.
Okay, passes 4-1. Thank you. Number 8, there's no ordinances for introduction. Number 9, there's no ordinance for adoption. We got resolution 25-07-2101 regarding government data practices.
Yes, government data practices. City's been following this for a while now. One of the, I believe it's a primary good practice, is to update it on a yearly basis, which I'll admit we have not been doing. And so as staff continues to go through professional development, this is one of the things that we learned that we should be looking at on a yearly basis. And so I'm bringing it back before you. Looking at it, it is basically the same document as before, if I remember right. Reading through this, Robin, from what I could tell, really just updating and saying that we have kind of looked at it. I do know that there was concerns that were raised tonight, and I don't know if the city attorney has anything to say about some of those concerns before we go forward. But yeah.
All right, whichever one. All right. No, thank you. And you should look at it annually, and you have looked at it many times over the years from the initial, most recent draft that I office did a few years back, I know. It doesn't mean you always have to do something different annually, but the reality is you need to look at it, so that's what staff has done. As the naming of a responsible authority, if you don't name anybody, it ends up being Josh. That's what the statute says. If that's the case, I don't know why you have to name it, but the statute says you should name somebody. The rule's a little bit confusing and different on that issue. And then there's a catch-all in the statute that says if you don't name somebody, it still ends up being your chief officer in the city. So you certainly can add after in the resolution, the name of Josh Tetzloff in there as city administrator Josh Tetzloff, and that'll be
Did we
fine.
do that one other time and we ended up picking Matt?
Yeah,
No, that
that's
was.
for something else.
That was our IT security officer.
I would really recommend not naming.
Right,
Individual,
yeah.
that is more precarious for operational purposes. If Josh passes away in
Yeah,
an accident today,
the
then
league says, and it was pointed out by Mr. Paulson, the league says you should do that. The rules sort of say that, but that's not what the statute says. So that's why I say it's a little bit confusing. There's a lot of cities that don't name somebody. I have no problem if you do name somebody, and I'm telling you, if you don't name them, the statute says it still becomes that person anyways.
Yeah, I
There's a
agree.
fallback on it.
Yeah, I agree with Bruce, is that if you name someone, then you're kind of locked in. But if you have a title, then that, you know,
And again, that's where it talks about an individual, but the reality is, if you don't name somebody, it says who that has to be. So I'm torn on that issue. I have no problem telling you to put a name in there. I get the idea of why you don't want. And then it says, again, going to the rules, not the statute, it says, well, then you should name somebody else after that if you don't. But you're going for a time period where you don't have somebody there. Unless you fall back on the statute where it says then you have that person as well.
I can see the one change being
Yeah.
if we had a city clerk and a city administrator, and you wanted the city clerk specifically maybe
Yep.
to be responsible and not the city administrator, that you would name that person. But within our document, we do call out that it's the city administrator, and so that would be the fallback person anyway, if nobody was named.
yeah, and studying and practicing contract law, we tried not to name names.
Yeah, and that's why I say the statute is just really not quite perfect in this regard.
Of course.
And the league's advice isn't, I think, perfect on this either. Somebody who worked at the league for 4.5 years, and I say the league does a wonderful job on this.
Yes, yep.
I think I recall back whenever we addressed it when I was mayor the first time, I think we made that decision not to name a name.
You did, and that's what I'm saying, you did that. Again, you got the comments from Mr. Paulson, you've got what the league says on it, and then you've got, I would say, a slight inconsistency between the statute and then the Minnesota rule that applies to that from the Department of Administration. With a catch-all that if you don't name anybody, it still gets back to that.
Right.
So, yeah, that's why it's kind of a silly statute.
Well, it's basically for employment purposes, isn't it?
No, this is data practice.
Data prac.
So this would be which documents we have to keep hold of for a certain amount of time. And at what point, like how long do we have to hold on to an employment file after somebody leaves?
That would be also records retention. Data practices is sort of a process. Records retention is how long you hold on to them. And then data practice provides how staff handles that data if you get requests, things like that.
Yes,
Very detailed area of the statutes in Minnesota Chapter 13.
right. And that's regarding how much you can charge for copies.
And that's
that
what
whole
your
system.
policy sets forth? Yes, you
Yes.
have to follow that, correct.
Yep.
Yeah, I remember this all too well. So,
It's pretty standard stuff, really, right?
It is extremely standard,
Yep.
and what the updates you do and look at are if there have been any changes statutorily that you should put in there, and you've got a reasonably updated policy. Once you adopt it again and re-adopt it, that's what you have. If changes are made by the legislature, we're still gonna have to comply with it, no matter what your policy says. So again, it's a guiding document for staff, for citizens, and for the council to utilize.
okay. Any other questions?
So I'm just looking through the resolution. The resolution doesn't say anything pursuant to the Chapter 13 as amended. So would that be something prudent to add in there in the event that?
I don't think it's necessary, because
Okay.
Minnesota courts have basically said you are using what the adopted amendment is anyway.
Okay,
And that's what we'd have to follow anyways, no matter what our policy says.
okay.
Did anything change at all in there, Josh? I don't see any red line or anything. I mean, there's no verbiage
Just
change.
The annual review.
Yeah, it was just kind of our annual review time.
Okay. So I will make a motion to approve Resolution 2507-2101, adopting a Minnesota Government Data Practices Act policy.
Okay, I'll second that. Any other comments or questions for Josh or our attorney?
As a side note, in the future, this may follow the organizational meeting, like in January, just to keep it on a common timeframe.
Timeframe?
So if you feel like, wow, we're seeing this again in 5 months, it would just be to get it on that schedule.
Okay,
Or the alternative is wait till the legislative session is done, but, because you'll have to change it anyways if that happens. So it's up to you, and staff can figure out what they want to do with that.
okay,
There are a number of cities that wait till the legislative session is done, wait till August meeting, and they look at policies at that point in time. Because most laws by default go into effect August 1st, if they don't have an earlier effective date.
okay. Any other questions or comments? We have a motion on the table. If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition? Okay, passes 5-0. Number 11, POPs permit fee waiver request.
Yes, I will take this because Ken is out of the office this week. So, on July 10th, Ken did receive an emailed request from the Forward New Prague Foundation requesting the city council waive the building permit fees related to the POPs facility. That letter is included in your packet. Basically, the total fees requested waived are $10,942.97 for all of their fees that they're requesting waived. Of note, there is a state surcharge in there of $450 that cannot be waived, as that is kind of a pass-through straight to the state. And I know as staff, we certainly deliberated about this a while, and we understand there have certainly been issues with this site going forward. I guess of note, this park board has committed up to $100,000 to help mitigate some soil issues. I believe the park board also included some sort of feasibility study money, if I remember right.
Yes, we did.
That they committed to that. And so I think at this point, I guess as a staff member, my recommendation would be to deny the request to waive the fees. Of note, along those lines, the city does pay its own building permit fees, such as the police station, or when we were doing renovations out at the park building. Even the work that was done out at the baseball field. We try to be as transparent as possible with where those fees are going, and so that is why we end up charging ourselves, so you can see that paper trail of what everything costs. Of note, and Ken did include in here, that Habitat Humanity has requested and received 50% fee waiver approvals from the council in the past for 8 homes that have been built dating back about 20 years. The reason given during those times were in an effort for the council to support affordable housing projects within the city. So I can certainly stand for any questions you have, but I guess at this point, my recommendation for equity across all projects, including projects the city does itself, would be to deny the request to waive those building permit fees.
So there was an item in the letter that said that the foundation is absorbing more underground costs in excess of the $100,000 that the park board already is allocating, up to $100,000. And when the park board was initially presented with this information, the estimate was up to $100,000. So has there been any documents to support the fact that they are absorbing more than the 100,000, up to 100,000?
So I will say, I'm not sure if Matt sat in on these meetings, so he may have more specific information than I did. I do know that they've talked to Ken about these other potential costs now that are being involved with utilizing, basically there's the piers, and then there's kind of the foundational structure that sits on top of the piers, and then there's the POPs facility.
Yeah.
I have not seen any concrete numbers yet for exactly what those extra costs are. I know that those, I think they've been talking kind of ongoing with Ken yet, but haven't formally said this is what we may or may not ask for. So I guess I can't speak exactly to what those costs would be. I know at this point their request is for the building permit.
Okay, all right. It's just, we can speculate at what costs are going to be, and that's a concern to me, because initially they said, you know, it could cost us $100,000, and we said, we'll fund you up to $100,000. We've already given the property, we've already done the feasibility study, we've already graded the area, you know, so the city has put in a lot of money up to this point, and I would like to see some more documentation that supports the fact that they're looking at potentially more dollars.
And I would assume if a formal request comes in, that would be the first thing that I would ask, is like, we'd want to see, to make sure that, as you said, we've got a formal documentation of where this money would be going.
Yeah, because the park board is funding up to $100,000, but that money will not be paid until we have receipts for the work.
So what's your thought, Maggie? Table it?
Well, so again, Rick, I would say that this is just for the building permit.
Right,
So,
right. Just the building
amount to
permit.
$10,492.97 once you take out that $450 for the state.
We could just let it sit there and then they could absorb out of that 100,000 and then do this at the end.
Yeah, well, I guess right now, I think the city has put a lot of money
I agree.
into the project. We're supporting the project. We appreciate the project by all means, and we know that this is going to be an asset to the city. But we just can't keep coming to the trough, and, you know, we haven't budgeted for this item, and at this point, I can't say yes to it.
For the sake of it not passing. Because I would like to see it too, because every week, or every, meeting, where it's getting a little bigger and bigger what they're getting out of us. We did donate the land, we did do, you said it perfectly. So, yeah, I would like to see that too.
As I said before with this issue, I'm not involved, I don't want to involve myself in any of it, and I will be abstaining, but I just want to clear up a perception that sometimes the way the wording is sometimes, Ford New Prague is not owning the land or getting the land. It's not, there's no transfer of ownership.
Right.
So when you say give the land, there's no giving going on here, except that Ford New Prague is giving to the city. That's what's occurring.
Understand.
Words have meanings, so I just
No,
want to be clear about that.
and your point is well taken, Bruce.
Okay, any other comments? What's your gut feel, Sean?
I agree with Maggie. I just don't, I don't want this, I don't want to set a precedent that people are going to be coming to the trough on these fees that everybody has to pay. So I think we've donated a lot already, and we've been as supportive as possible. And even though we didn't give the land, it's taking away from something that we perhaps could have sold that one day for a profit for the taxpayers, because we certainly made our money on it over the years by renting it out to when the mill was in operation and the trucks were using it to park. But
Okay, I guess I'll look for a motion.
I'll make a motion to deny the approval of, hello there, what are we looking at?
The POPs.
To the
permit
request
fee.
to waive the building permit fee.
Okay, I have a motion.
I'll second.
Got a second by Sean Ryan. Any other comments? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Abstain.
And one I abstain from, the thing by Councilmember Wolf. So it passes 4-0 with one abstention. All right. 12, miscellaneous. Anything we need to discuss there?
I just wanted to make note that after the next meeting, I will be scheduling a closed session for my annual review, since we're coming up on August. So I believe working with the mayor to kind of get those items out to you guys for review, and if you got any questions, certainly let me know. But
Yep. Okay. Rick, do you have anything else to add for tonight's meeting?
No.
Bruce?
I know it's a miscellaneous in the population thing, and Ken put that together, but I
Yeah.
don't know if you can speak to it, but
A little bit.
this Mr. Paulson brought up the terminology of why people leaving. Is there anything in any data that we've seen that there's an exodus of people leaving?
So the
Prague?
data, yeah, so this is something we've been fighting with the Metropolitan Council now for the last 2 years as the numbers have come back because we continue to not see vacant housing units. In fact, housing units are getting built, and yet our population keeps going down. The sewer side seems to be increasing. The Scott County side seems to be decreasing. According to the Metropolitan Council, they believe they overpopulated us a few years ago, and so they're correcting by reducing numbers based off of household sizes that they're seeing in other areas of the Metropolitan Council. That is the information that we've gotten from them. Like I said, I know from a city's perspective, we've not necessarily seen any increased vacancy in housing above what would be a normal vacancy rate. And
The only
so-
difference is how they're counting it.
And yeah, so they're, for example, instead of counting 2.4, and I don't know if this is the exact number, I can't remember reading into this. Oh yes, here we go. Ken said, unlike last year, the estimate shows that a per person household they basically counted 2.652 people per household instead of 2.661 based off the stats they had across the metro. And so that in doing so reduced the Scott County side of our population.
So I'm gonna ask an obvious question, and I'm sorry if this offends anyone, but because we're not part of the Met Council, are we not favored?
So we are not part of the Met Council, but yeah, because our Scott County side is on there, they seem to have control over what our Scott County
Yeah,
side.
so, yeah,
population
so
is.
folks at Met Council, you know, we're not a member of Met Council for a
Correct.
reason.
Yeah, there you go, for a reason.
But doesn't projections have been made showing the growth of the city in the next 5 to 10 years?
Projections certainly have us growing, and as hopefully we've had internal conversations only, nothing's been formally applied for. As housing projects hopefully start to kick off more, then yes, you would start to see some of the growth that those projections have called for.
Okay.
That's all.
Okay. Maggie, do you anything else you want to add?
Just a question, and this would be Chief Applin. Chief, are you seeing any uptick on e-bikes and e-boards and the speed and this age of the people operating them and potential accidents? And I only ask this because there has been a little bit of uptick in the news about these e-bikes on sidewalks and pedestrians. And so I just didn't know if there was anything out there at the state level or otherwise that may control some of the concern.
We have, as technology and e-bikes and electric scooters and things of the like have become more popular, we've seen an increase in them. And I think it was last week or week before, we put out a kind of an informational sheet on our Facebook page to educate people in town about the rules and regulations for e-bikes and electric scooters and things of that nature, where you can ride them, where you can't ride them, size, age limits, helmets, all of those things. So we are not unique in seeing that. It's a problem across every chief that I talk to. So I've been in conversations with Ken Ondich about updating our ordinance to bring it into, I guess, the 21st century and e-bike world that we live in now. So our hope is that we are able to educate people this summer to where they can and can't go and what they can and can't do with them. And our officers have actually had quite a few conversations since we sent that out, just to try and educate people as to what they can and can't do. And our primary goal here is safety. And you know, that's my concern. I see it when I drive around, and these scooters and no helmets and, you know, not stopping at stop signs and out in front of traffic and all those things. So yes, we are trying to raise awareness to the laws and safety of these before something, you know, unfortunate happens to somebody, a kid or an adult or, you know,
Yeah.
something of that nature.
So there are actually regulations and.
There are, yep.
Okay,
So
okay.
age limits, helmets,
Really? Wow,
wattages on the scooters.
okay.
Up to a certain wattage for, in town and how fast they can go, and those things are all regulated by the state.
Is the city able to license these vehicles so that the riders have to go through some informed training? I can only remember way back when I was a kid, you know, 7, 8 years old, in the city in which I lived, my bicycle had to be licensed, and I had to go through a bicycle safety course, you know. So these things are a lot faster than I could ever pedal. And, you know, being a walker, as you well know I am, you know, my concern is having one of these e-bikes and scooters coming up behind me, and they're not saying, I'm on your left or I'm on your right, and I could zigzag and, you know, be wiped out, as could anybody.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just my concern. So I just,
I think there's absolutely an opportunity there, you know, much like when we allowed, ATV, UTV, golf carts,
yes,
right?
yeah,
As a city, we could designate what we wanted to do and where we wanted to allow and where we didn't want to allow and what the rules and regulations are. Now, we have to be careful that we can't be more restrictive than a state statute necessarily, but we'd have to look at that with the city attorney's office and look through how that would apply to the city and what we wanted to do. We would wanna follow the state law, but then, you know, more restrictive, less restrictive. I don't know what that looks like for us, but again, I think we're in the world of technology, right? Now you can order things from all over the world that don't necessarily apply to US manufacturing standards or anything, right? You can get anything from anywhere now. So I think that's our challenge, is just regulating. It's much like a traffic law,
yes.
right?
So they have
So-
to be, really, they should be off the sidewalks, and they should be
Yes.
following the rules of a driver of a vehicle.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
But yet some of the riders are not of driving age.
Correct.
So that creates the challenge.
It does, yep.
Okay.
And, I mean, e-bikes are like a bicycle, they are to follow the rules of the road like a motor vehicle,
Right.
right? So stopping at stop signs and right-hand side of the road and doing those things, so. And again, I don't know that it's intentional, I think it's just, people aren't informed of what they can and can't do with them, right? They
Right.
think these are really cool, and my friend has one, so we're gonna buy one for the neighbor, and then pretty soon there's 6 of them riding around with no idea of what they can and can't do with them. So, again, back to our educational piece, that's what we're trying to do, is be out there and educate people on what they can and can't do, and just try to bring some awareness before, you know, I don't wanna see anything happen, I guess is our biggest concern.
Agree. Is that something that the school district could possibly promote as well?
I think there potentially could be an opportunity there. I think with that, the school district, you know, how many people are you targeting? You know, how many people have these? Like in a class of 30 people, if 3 people have them, is the school gonna see that as a benefit to
Understand.
their time and
Sure.
efforts, right?
Sure.
But I think there's an opportunity there for maybe our SRO to have some conversations and maybe a class. I know they talk with the younger kids, you know, primarily at the elementary schools about bike safety and things, but we're talking like pedal bikes, right?
Yes.
You know, when they first get out there and be careful and wear your helmet, and maybe there's an opportunity to look, you know, at middle age or middle school in that age group with an e-bike or a e-scooter educational piece, and that's certainly something I can talk to the school and our school resource officer about.
I don't mean to put extra burden on you and your team, but,
No.
you know, I'm out there and it's like, oh gosh, there's just an accident waiting to happen.
No, and we saw it too, which is why we put out the post and the educational piece, and we're trying to hand them out, like we carry that flyer around and we can hand them out to people as we see them and say, hey, here's the rules, you know, bring it home, show mom and dad, or we've even had conversations with parents, like we
Great.
called and just said, hey, just so you know, here's what you can and can't do. And overwhelmingly, people have been supportive of that and appreciative of the efforts, and, you know, the response is, oh, we didn't know that. Right, which tells us that what we're doing is working, so.
Great. Thank you for addressing
Yep.
it. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I just, since Scott's here, comment on Mr. Paulson's comment about the submissions. I was just not clear on my understanding of how we work is people can submit written submissions for a hearing if they can't make it a hearing, and I think we've put them in the packet. But I'm not sure that we've ever have the ability or have allowed submissions for agenda items unless they were procured by the administrator or part of a package.
You control your agenda.
Excuse me?
You control your agenda, so, no, I don't know why that would be relevant if they're outside submissions or something like that. Certainly for public hearings, yes, you do that. But yes, the agenda is controlled by you and your staff. Just because somebody wants something on the agenda, that's up to you whether you have it or not, or you decide as
Well,
council.
I've just never been familiar since I've been
Yeah.
involved here where we've just allowed people to submit things.
I'm not aware of that either, no.
Unless it's part of a public hearing, part of it.
Hold on a second.
Yeah, I'm not aware of that either, so.
You may have misunderstood.
Go ahead.
I was just talking about, like, on the website where they have the agenda, and then you can have hyperlinks towards the packet that has, 100 and some pages. So they'll, like the miscellaneous A population estimate, you can click on it and it has that document. So I believe, and part of it is like legality or being nice. It would be nice to have. So like for the petition example, you guys were given a memo that would be like attached to that item. But that was actually blank on the website. There's nothing on there. I guess that was what I was trying to get at is it would have been nice to have that. I think the minimum legal requirement is if like a memo was given to all of you, I think it has to be presented at the table out front. I think that is the legal minimum requirement, so.
Okay.
You're talking a memo that came from a resident or a memo that was?
I think he's talking about the memo from staff.
Oh, staff, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's what we've done in the past, and maybe unless it's not done, but anything that's on the agenda that we receive is available to the public, so I
Correct.
don't know that we've not done that, but I get it.
Okay.
No, I mean, I guess I will say to that point, usually after the meeting, I'll have staff post what we had up there. I'll certainly work with Scott to make sure that we're following all the regulations on posting and making sure stuff gets out.
There's certainly times when we have presenters that don't bring their package to us. It's not part of the agenda, but it's given to us that day or at the meeting or something, but that's available to the public at the same time we see it, so.
What Mr. Paulson's referring to is a public meeting book, and we'll make sure it's updated properly. I think, isn't that what it is?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you. Sean, anything?
Just some clarification on the Economic Development District. I wasn't able to stay at the meeting, the EDA meeting, but Josh, can you explain that just a little bit to me? I'm a little fuzzy on it. And then the second part of that question is that what the public hearing is about at the next EDA board?
Yes, so part of the strategic plan that the EDA is working through is kind of developing goals for what it wants to do next, kind of to help spur economic development across the city. And many of the things that the EDA is able to do, they must do so within an economic development district, if I understand that correct, Scott?
Correct, that's correct.
And so, as we've been looking through, part of the process of the strategic plan is then just to fully update that economic development district to include the entire boundary of the city.
Yep.
So that way, where the EDA decides to go or what it wants to work on, it is able to do so. So the public hearing then is on that. Like it is to hear the public, do you have a comment on us updating and expanding this economic development district to cover the entire city? I know it was reported differently in the paper, but that's what it is. And then what was the second part of your question again?
Is that what the next EDA meeting?
Yeah, so then at the next.
I think the dates were wrong in the paper.
Yeah, at the next EDA meeting, which is August 13th, I believe, it's always that second Wednesday, they'll hold a public hearing then to take comment on updating that economic development district across the boundaries of the entire city.
And it's reasonably normal, and I won't speak for Rebecca, she can comment as well, but it's reasonably normal for an EDA in a city to designate the entire city as the economic development district. That's what we mostly see. I don't know if it was updated since even the land was annexed in for the business park and things like that, and that's why we said, you're doing a strategic plan, you put and dot all the i's, cross all the t's, say you're covering the entire city, and that was a recommendation from myself and I think Rebecca as well. It's normal process to do, so yeah, you would do this whether or not you were going down a financing route or you're just dealing with the ED and its strategic plan. You would be doing this at this point in time.
And to that end, where I said that many of the things EDA would do have to occur within this district, that includes lease revenue bonds, as far as I understand. And so whether it was a police station or something else, to be able to, for the EDA to even go through this EDA lease revenue bond, that facility would have to be built within an economic development district. So they happen to be piggybacking on each other a little bit, but this economic development district was discussed at the EDA when we started talking about the strategic plan. Which happened back when we thought the city council was going to be pursuing the CIP bond back in the spring. So it is a coincidence now that they've happened to pair up, but it is needed to also go down that route.
Okay, and what kind of authority does that give the EDA? I mean, you said they're coming up with goals and plans, and to what extent?
Yeah, so the EDA here soon, and I know we're working with Ellers on figuring this out, we'll be having a joint session kind of with the city council of, hey, these are kind of what we're looking at as overarching goals through our strategic plan. Do we kind of get the blessing on these? And if so, we'll start kind of developing maybe some action plans of, okay, we want to focus on this area of town, or focus on maybe downtown rehab, or using our funds in that way. The enabling resolution that you guys will be updating still says that the EDA needs to come to the city council or get the city council's authority to be able to borrow, correct?
Yes.
And so really, it is no more authority than the EDA currently has. It's the authority given to them by the city council, who ultimately approves their levy every year. And in this case, will also be giving its blessing on the strategic plan before they get too deep into the process.
Okay.
Yeah, and Sean, everything is set up basically for an EDA and, the city itself in the set of statutes that apply here. You're not doing anything beyond that. That's what it is. So really the change isn't modifying that to any degree.
I just want to piggyback on that because I've got some history here. But I mentioned that the industrial park was started through when they purchased the Minnesota Valley Breeders property, or 21st Century Genetics property at that time in 1989. That was the start of the industrial park. What's kind of spearheading the strategic plan in that thinking was I think it was last year, where we talked about, or even before that, now, as we sell the lots, and we're getting down to the last 2 lots, I think, or 1, or...
We have current 2 unsold, but having conversations about whether to sell them.
So this seems like a very appropriate time to do a reassessment for the city. Back in 1988 and even before, they wanted to own land and do this. But now that we're at the end of a last piece of land that we're going to own, do we want to continue to do that, or is there something else we should do with the money, incentives or whatever? So that's part of the strategic planning, and also what we would want the city council to think about. What is the philosophy going forward? It's interesting that Eilers is bringing up different thoughts, so I think it's a good thing to go. It's needed. I think it's definitely needed that we kind of figure out what direction we want to go. The industrial park has been good, but it's taken a long time and hasn't necessarily made any money either. But so it's a good time, and that's what's spearheading this. Already discussed it last year and started the process here. But
I will say, Sean, of note, I have already had Alyssa prepare an agenda that basically would announce that there could be a quorum at the next meeting. So you can certainly attend future meetings. We've got that taken care of now.
Okay.
Anything else, Sean?
No, that was it.
I don't have anything, so I guess I'll make a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, you're gonna second it?
Oh, you made a motion. I'll second. Thank you.
Okay. Motion by Chuck Nicolai, second by Maggie Bass. Any other questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition? None, so we're out of here. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Thank you.
Oh.